The CEO's little daughter stopped the black janitor and said, "They beat my mom, she's dying." Her secret past shocked everyone. "You have to help me. They hit my mom, she's dying." The 7-year-old girl grabbed Jonathan Williams' gray uniform with both trembling hands, her blue eyes overflowing with tears as she looked up desperately. Jonathan was mopping the hallway on the 40th floor of the corporate plaza building when little Sophie Blackwood came running out of her mother's office. It was almost 11 at night, the building was empty, and the only person who could help was the black janitor whom all the executives greeted with a polite but distant nod. "Where's your mother?" Jonathan asked, immediately dropping the cleaning cart. Sophie pointed to the double-glass doors of the president's office, from which muffled sounds of struggle and screams were coming. Jonathan was 34 years old and had been working as a janitor in that building for 2 years. To everyone there, he was just another cleaning employee, invisible, silent, someone who kept the room spotless while the important people went about their million-dollar business. What no one knew was that Jonathan carried scars that told a very different story. He crouched down to the girl's height, his large, calloused hands gently touching her shoulders. "Sophie, I want you to go to that closet over there and stay inside until I come back, okay? Don't come out for anything." When Jonathan opened the office doors, he found a scene that made his blood run cold. Rachel Blackwood, CEO of the largest technology company in the country, was being beaten by 3 men in suits. She was trying to defend herself, but she was losing the fight. "Hey!" Jonathan shouted, drawing the attention of the attackers. The 3 men turned around, and one of them laughed contemptuously. "Look, guys. The janitor wants to play hero." "Get out of here, Blackie. This is none of your business," spat another, showing a gun at his waist. That's when Jonathan did something no one expected. In 3 precise and lethal movements, the 3 men were on the ground, unconscious. His body moved with a military fluidity that contrasted completely with the image of the submissive janitor everyone knew. Rachel looked at him with wide eyes, blood dripping from her lip. "Who are you?" "Just a janitor who was in the right place at the right time," Jonathan replied, already checking her injuries with the precision of someone trained in first aid. 20 minutes later, when the police arrived, something strange happened. Instead of treating Jonathan like the hero who saved one of the most powerful women in the country, the officers began asking suspicious questions. "You were alone with her when we arrived," said Detective Morrison, looking Jonathan up and down. "How do we know you weren't involved in this?" "He saved me," protested Rachel, but Jonathan saw that familiar expression in the officer's eyes. To them, a black man alone with an injured wealthy white woman could only mean one thing. While answering the leading questions, Jonathan maintained a calmness that only exists in those who have faced much worse situations. His eyes revealed a serenity that came from closely guarded secrets, secrets that, if revealed, would completely change the way those people saw him. If you're enjoying this story of twists and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what you don't know about Jonathan's past will leave everyone speechless. 3 hours later, Jonathan was sitting in a cold, dimly lit interrogation room, being bombarded with questions that made it very clear what the detectives really thought of him. "You said you were mopping the hallway, but the cameras show you were standing in the same spot for 15 minutes, said Detective Morrison, slamming a folder on the table. "Why were you spying on Ms. Blackwood's office?" Jonathan kept his hands folded on the table, his upright and calm posture contrasting with the aggressiveness of the police officers. It wasn't the first time he had faced questioning based on racial suspicion, but this time there was something different in his eyes, a patience that came from someone who had seen much worse. "I wasn't spying on anyone. I was doing my job," Jonathan replied, his voice maintaining a respectful tone that made the detectives even more irritated. Detective Parker, Morrison's partner, leaned forward. 3 armed men attack one of the richest women in town, and the only one who can save her is you? What a coincidence, don't you think? Meanwhile, at the private hospital where Rachel was being treated, a phone call would completely change the course of events. "Senora Blackwood, this is Dr. Martinez. Regarding the tests you asked to keep confidential." The doctor's voice was tense. "The blood results show that you were drugged with rohypnol before the attack. Someone planned this very carefully." Rachel closed her eyes, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. It hadn't been a random assault. Someone wanted her to be vulnerable, incapacitated. And they knew exactly when she would be alone in the office. Her mind flew to that afternoon's board meeting, where she had categorically rejected the proposal to merge with Sterling Corporation. The CEO, Vincent Sterling, had made no secret of his anger when she vetoed the $2 billion deal. "You'll regret this decision, Rachel," he had said, his eyes cold as ice. "There are ways to make stubborn people change their minds." Now she understood. Vincent wasn't making a vague threat. He was announcing a plan that was already in motion. That same night, while Jonathan was still being questioned, Vincent Sterling paced the office of his private attorney, Richard Ashford, on the 55th floor of another corporate building. "Has the problem been solved?" Vincent asked, pouring himself $1,000 whiskey. "Partially," Ashford replied, adjusting his glasses. "Blackwood is hospitalized, but there was a complication. A janitor interfered, and now the police are investigating." Vincent laughed dismissively. "A janitor? What kind of pathetic hero?" "That's where it gets interesting," the lawyer continued. "According to my contacts in the police, the guy knocked out 3 trained men in less than a minute. That's not exactly the profile of an ordinary janitor." At the police station, the interrogation was intensifying. Morrison decided to tighten the noose. "You know what I think, Williams? I think you were working with those men. I think something went wrong with the plan and you had to improvise to avoid getting caught." Jonathan tilted his head slightly, as if seriously considering the accusation. "That's an interesting theory, detective. But answer me this, if I was working with them, why is Rachel Blackwood still alive?" The simple question left Morrison speechless for a few seconds. Parker tried to regain control. "Maybe because you realized it was going to go south and tried to minimize the damage." That's when Jonathan did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a nervous or defensive smile, but the calm smile of someone who knew exactly how this conversation was going to end. "Detectives, have you checked the street security cameras? Specifically from 10:47 p.m. to 10:52 p.m. Morrison frowned. "Why that specific time?" "Because at 10:47 p.m., a black van with no license plates stopped in front of the building. 3 men got out. At 10:52 p.m., the same van sped away. I bet if you check the cameras on the parallel street, you'll see the van stopping again and the same 3 men being thrown into it, unconscious." The 2 detectives looked at each other. This information was too specific to be made up. "How do you know that?" Morrison asked. "Because I have a habit of noticing things that don't make sense. A van without license plates parking in front of a corporate building at 11 p.m.? That would catch the attention of anyone who works in security." Parker leaned forward. "You said anyone who works in security. But you're a janitor." Jonathan kept smiling. "Yes. I've been a janitor for 2 years. Before that," he paused deliberately. "Before that, I had other occupations." At that moment, the door to the room opened and a woman in a suit entered with a briefcase under her arm. "I'm attorney Amanda Foster, representing Mr. Williams. This conversation is over." Morrison protested. "We're in the middle of an important interrogation. No formal charges, no warrant, and you've kept him here for 4 hours without allowing him a phone call. My client is leaving now." As he walked down the hallway alongside the lawyer, Jonathan asked quietly, "Did Rachel send you?" "Not exactly," Amanda replied. "Let's just say that certain people recognize when someone with your background needs legal protection." "My background?" Amanda stopped and looked him straight in the eye. "Captain Jonathan Williams, Army Special Forces, 3 tours in Afghanistan, Medal of Honor for exceptional valor in combat. Yes, your background." It was the first time Jonathan looked genuinely surprised. "How did you?" "The right people ask the right questions, Captain. And now we need to talk about why a war hero is working as a janitor and why someone very powerful wants both you and Rachel Blackwood to disappear." Outside the police station, a man in a dark car watched Jonathan leave. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Mr. Sterling? It's Johnson. We have a much bigger problem than we thought. The janitor is no ordinary janitor. He's ex-military, special forces. And now he has high-level legal protection." Vincent's voice on the other end of the line was cold. "I don't care if he's a former astronaut. Everyone has a price or a weak spot. Find his." As Jonathan walked through the empty streets toward his apartment, his mind was working on 2 fronts, protecting Rachel and Sophie, and finding out who had orchestrated the attack. What Vincent Sterling and his henchmen didn't know was that they had picked the wrong opponent. During 3 years in Afghanistan, Jonathan had learned that the most dangerous enemies weren't the ones who shouted and made threats. They were the ones who planned in silence, watched every move, and struck when you least expected it. Vincent Sterling thought he was hunting a frightened janitor. In fact, he had awakened something inside Jonathan that had been dormant for 2 years, something his military superiors had nicknamed the Ghost for its ability to appear where needed and disappear without a trace. Over the next 24 hours, Vincent would discover that the difference between intimidating an ordinary worker and provoking a soldier trained for war was the difference between poking a sleeping kitten and waking a hungry lion. The next morning, Jonathan woke up at 5:30 a.m., as he had done every day for 2 years. The difference was that this time, he didn't head to the corporate plaza building. Instead, he walked to a discreet cafe in the city center, where Amanda Foster was already waiting for him with 2 cups of coffee and a folder full of documents. "Did you sleep well, Captain?" Amanda asked, watching Jonathan sit down. "Or should I call you Jonathan?" "Jonathan will do." "That other guy. He stayed in Afghanistan," he replied, picking up his coffee. "What did you find out about Vincent Sterling?" Amanda opened the folder, revealing an impressive stack of investigations. "More than we expected. Vincent Sterling isn't just a corrupt CEO, he's at the center of a corporate intimidation network that's been operating for 15 years. Rachel Blackwood wasn't the first victim." She slid several photos across the table. Margaret Chun, CEO of Technovision, died in a car accident 3 days after rejecting a merger with Sterling. David Rodriguez, owner of a biotech startup, found dead in his apartment after refusing to sell his patents. Jonathan studied the photos with the cold concentration of someone analyzing targets in enemy territory. How many victims? At least 16 documented cases in the last 10 years. All executives who refused to do business with Vincent. Some died, others simply disappeared, and a few were forced to accept his terms after physical persuasion. Meanwhile, in the glass skyscraper that housed the Sterling Corporation headquarters, Vincent paced back and forth in his 60th floor office, clearly agitated. "What do you mean, we couldn't find anything on him?" Vincent shouted at the 3 private investigators sitting across from him. "Everyone has skeletons in their closet. A black janitor who's a former military man? There has to be something." The lead investigator, a bald man named Thompson, cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Sterling, we've checked everything. Clean criminal record, impeccable military history, 3 medals for bravery, no debts, no vices, stable relationships. The guy is literally a saint." "There are no saints." Vincent slammed his fist on the table. "Find something. A traffic ticket, a bar fight, any shit we can use." What Vincent didn't know was that, at that very moment, Jonathan was 3 blocks away, sitting in the cafe, meticulously planning the downfall of the Sterling Empire. "What's the plan?" Jonathan asked, his voice maintaining the calm tone he had learned to use on reconnaissance missions. Amanda smiled. "First, we need to protect Rachel and Sophie. Vincent will try again, and next time he won't underestimate you." "I've already thought about that," Jonathan replied. "I have some contacts from my army days. Former Rangers who work in private security. They can keep the 2 of them safe while we take care of Vincent." "Second," Amanda continued, "we need to gather concrete evidence. Vincent is careful, but arrogant men always make mistakes. Especially when they're provoked." Jonathan tilted his head. "Provoked how?" "Like a black janitor who dared to save her from his clutches. An insignificant man who made Vincent look weak in front of his henchmen. That will eat away at his ego until he makes a fatal mistake." 2 hours later, Jonathan was back at the corporate plaza building, but not as a janitor. Wearing a simple but well-tailored suit that Amanda had provided, he headed straight for Rachel's office on the 40th floor. The secretary, a young woman named Lisa, recognized him immediately. "Mr. Williams. Ms. Blackwood is waiting for you." Rachel was sitting behind her desk, still wearing some bandages on her face, but her eyes shone with a determination Jonathan had never seen before. "Jonathan," she stood up, extending her hand. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did." "You don't have to thank me," Jonathan replied, shaking her hand. "But you need to understand that Vincent Sterling won't stop. He tried once, he'll try again. I know, Rachel nodded. That's why I want to propose something. You know Vincent better than any private investigator. You know how men like him think, how they operate. I want to hire you as my personal security consultant. Jonathan hesitated. Rachel, I'm just a... You're a war hero disguised as a janitor, she interrupted him. And now that I know who you really are, I'd be stupid not to take advantage of your expertise. Just then, Rachel's phone rang. She glanced at the display and her face paled. It's him. It's Vincent. Answer it, Jonathan said, activating the speakerphone. Let him talk. Vincent's soft, controlled voice echoed through the office. Rachel, dear. I heard you had some trouble last night. What a terrible tragedy. What do you want, Vincent? Rachel replied, her voice firm. I want to help, of course. This kind of random violence is becoming all too common. Perhaps it's time to reconsider my merger proposal. Imagine the security you and your daughter would have under the protection of Sterling Corporation. Jonathan signaled Rachel to continue the conversation. Your proposal remains rejected, Vincent. And it wasn't random violence. It was men you sent. A long, cold silence followed. When Vincent spoke again, all false cordiality had disappeared. Be careful what you say, Rachel. Unfounded accusations can have serious legal consequences. And this new friend of yours, this caretaker who's been meddling where he wasn't called for. I hope he understands the risks of getting involved in situations that are beyond his comprehension. Is that a threat, Vincent? It's advice. From a friend concerned for your well-being. The line went dead. Jonathan turned to Rachel. He just made his first mistake. Direct threats on tape. Amanda will love that. But he's right about one thing, Rachel said, worried. You're taking real risks by getting involved in this. Jonathan smiled, and for the first time since she had known him, Rachel saw a glimpse of the soldier he had once been. Rachel, I spent 3 years hunting terrorists in remote mountains in Afghanistan. Vincent Sterling is a spoiled billionaire who hires others to do his dirty work. Trust me, I've faced much more dangerous opponents. Meanwhile, in Vincent's office, he was on the phone with his private attorney. Richard, I want you to use every contact we have. Cops, judges, prosecutors. I want that janitor arrested for anything. Trespassing, assault, whatever bullshit you can come up with. Vincent, after the recording leaked from the police station, where the detectives were clearly harassing him because of racism, any action we take will look like retaliation. It will only make our situation worse. Vincent slammed his fist on the table. I don't care. I want that son of a bitch out of my way. It was exactly the reaction Jonathan and Amanda were hoping for. That afternoon, Jonathan did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He visited an old army buddy. Michael Santos worked as an instructor at a self-defense gym in the suburbs. Damn, Jonathan! Michael exclaimed when he saw him. I thought you'd become a pacifist after you came back from Afghanistan. Circumstances have changed, Jonathan replied. I need your help, Mike. And some of the other guys. What do you need? Protection for a mother and daughter. And maybe some favors related to surveillance and information gathering. Michael studied Jonathan's serious face. Is this official or personal? Personal. But with implications that could help a lot of people. Considering you saved my life twice in Afghanistan, I'd say I'm still in your debt. How many men do you need? 4 for protection, 2 for surveillance. All discreet, all reliable. Done. When do we start? While organizing his small operation, Jonathan received a call from Amanda. We have a problem, she said. Vincent has obtained a temporary restraining order claiming that you pose a threat to the security of the building where he works. You are officially banned from entering the corporate plaza building. Jonathan smiled. Perfect. It means he's desperate. Desperate men make bigger mistakes. What do you mean, perfect? Now you can't protect Rachel. Amanda, who says I need to be inside the building to protect her. I've spent 3 years protecting targets from a distance. Vincent has just given me the perfect excuse to use more creative methods. That night, when Vincent left his office at 11 p.m., Believing himself to be safe in his protected routine, he didn't notice the discreet man who followed him to the underground parking lot. He didn't notice the small camera installed in his car. And he definitely didn't imagine that his phone conversations were being recorded by state-of-the-art military equipment operated by former Special Forces soldiers. Vincent Sterling had declared war on the wrong man. And the most ironic thing was that the more he tried to intimidate Jonathan, the more tools he was handing over for his own destruction. While Vincent slept in his $5 million mansion, protected by private security guards and alarm systems, Jonathan was 3 kilometers away in his modest apartment, coordinating an operation that utilized skills Vincent didn't even know existed. The arrogant billionaire who despised little janitors was about to discover that he had underestimated not just one man, but a whole set of values and skills that money couldn't buy. And what he didn't know was that his own arrogance was becoming the most powerful weapon in Jonathan's hands. For a moment, as Vincent fell asleep that night feeling safe and in control, he couldn't have imagined that his every move was being documented by a surveillance network that would make the CIA jealous. A network operated by men who had learned the art of war not in boardrooms, but on real battlefields. The next morning, Vincent Sterling woke up feeling invincible. He had slept well, satisfied with his strategy of isolating Jonathan from the building and pressuring Rachel through legal channels. As he sipped his $300 Italian espresso, he had no idea that he was about to experience the worst day of his life. At 9:15 a.m., when he arrived at his office on the 60th floor, he found his secretary, Patricia, visibly nervous. "Mr. Sterling, there's a reporter from Channel 7 News calling insistently. She says she has some questions about serious allegations." Vincent frowned. What kind of allegations? Before Patricia could answer, her phone rang again. "Channel 7 News again, sir." "Put her through," Vincent said confidently. He had been dealing with the media for years. Vincent Sterling speaking. "Mr. Sterling, this is Jennifer Walsh from Investigative News. Would you like to comment on the recordings where you confess to ordering the attack on CEO Rachel Blackwood?" Vincent's blood ran cold. "What recordings? That's ridiculous. I never." "Sir, we have in our possession telephone conversations where you discuss specific details of the attack, including the use of Rohypnol and the hiring of men to intimidate Ms. Blackwood. Would you like to make a statement before the report airs at 6 p.m.? Vincent slammed the phone down, his hands shaking. How was this possible? He had always been careful, always spoken in code. 10 minutes later, his lawyer Richard Ashford burst into the office, carrying a tablet and looking livid. "Vincent, we have a huge problem. Someone has leaked financial documents showing payments to private security companies that match the dates of the attacks exactly. And there's more, audio recordings where you mention physical persuasion to convince executives." Vincent snatched the tablet from Richard's hands. On the screen, a news site displayed an article with the headline, "Billionaire confesses 2 violent attacks against business rivals. Exclusive audio recordings reveal criminal plot." "That's impossible," Vincent muttered, reading quickly. "No one had access to those conversations. I always use secure phones, armored offices." "Vincent," Richard said gravely, "there's a federal police van pulling up right now." Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, Jonathan sat in an inconspicuous cafe, watching the developments unfold on his cell phone. Beside him, Amanda Foster smiled discreetly as she received constant updates from her contacts in the press. 16 different media outlets received the complete package, she reported. Recordings, financial documents, photos, victim statements. Your network of ex-military personnel did an impressive job of gathering evidence. Jonathan nodded. Vincent made the classic mistake. He thought he was hunting easy prey and didn't realize he had become the hunted. Amanda's phone rang. "It's Rachel," she said, answering on speakerphone. "Amanda, Jonathan, you need to see this." Rachel's voice was trembling with excitement. "The FBI just raided Sterling Corporation. There are cameras from every network. Vincent is being arrested live on television." In Vincent's office, the scene was one of utter chaos. Federal agents confiscated computers, files, and phones while Vincent, handcuffed, shouted about his rights and demanded to speak to more expensive lawyers. "Vincent Sterling," announced Special Agent Maria Rodriguez, "you are under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, attempted murder, and formation of a criminal organization. You have the right to remain silent." The cameras captured the exact moment Vincent realized the magnitude of his downfall. His eyes widened when he saw the number of journalists on the sidewalk, the TV vans, the helicopters flying over the building. "You don't understand," he shouted at the cameras. "I built an empire. I am Vincent Sterling. This is a setup." But his words only made the situation worse. The reporters had exactly the desperate reactions they needed to complement the story. In the days that followed, Vincent's fall was brutal and complete. The recordings revealed not only the attack on Rachel, but a network of intimidation that had been operating for 15 years. Executives who had been forced to accept mergers now felt safe to speak out. The Sterling Corporation board called an emergency meeting and removed Vincent from all positions. The company's stock plummeted 78% in 2 days. Corporate clients canceled billion-dollar contracts. Banks froze personal assets. Patricia, his former secretary, gave an exclusive interview revealing how Vincent humiliated employees and spoke openly about putting people in their place. "He always said that people like that janitor needed to know their place in the hierarchy," she reported, her words being broadcast nationally. "He used horrible words to refer to anyone he considered inferior." The cruelest twist came when it was discovered that 3 of Vincent's major investors were actually relatives of his previous victims, people who had bought Sterling stock over the years, patiently waiting for an opportunity for justice. In federal prison, Vincent Sterling, the man who had once moved billions and commanded a corporate empire, was assigned to cell number 247. His cellmate was a black man named Marcus, a former military man who had been wrongfully convicted of a crime he did not commit, exactly the kind of person Vincent had always despised. "So you're the famous billionaire," Marcus said, studying Vincent with interest. "I hear you liked to humiliate hardworking people. How interesting." Vincent, who had always controlled everything through money and intimidation, now discovered what it was like to be completely vulnerable, depending on the goodwill of people he considered inferior. Meanwhile, Jonathan resumed his job at the corporate plaza building, but now with one crucial difference. Rachel had officially promoted him to director of corporate security, with a salary 10 times that of a janitor. "I'm not accepting it for the money," Jonathan told Rachel during the meeting where she offered him the position. "I accept because I want to make sure that no other Vincent Sterling can do this to anyone who works in this building." In his first week in his new position, Jonathan implemented security protocols worthy of military operations. But more importantly, he created an anonymous channel where any employee could report intimidation or abuse without fear of retaliation. What Vincent Sterling could never have imagined was that his attempt to humiliate a simple black janitor had awakened a force that not only destroyed him, but created a system that would protect thousands of workers in the future. Vincent's arrogance blinded him to a fundamental truth. When you attack someone who has spent years protecting others on the battlefield, you are not just confronting a person, you are challenging a code of honor that considers the protection of the vulnerable a sacred mission. 6 months later, Jonathan Williams walked through the halls of the corporate plaza building wearing an impeccable suit, carrying a leather briefcase, and being greeted respectfully by all the employees. As director of corporate security, he had completely transformed the culture of the place. "Good morning, Mr. Williams," said Lisa, the secretary who had previously barely noticed his presence when he pushed the cleaning cart through the same hallways. On the 40th floor, Jonathan stopped in front of a gold plaque, "Jonathan Williams, Director of Security and Worker Protection." Inside his office, Sophie played while waiting for her mother to finish a meeting. "Uncle Jonathan," she ran to hug him. "Mom said you're having dinner with us tonight." Rachel appeared at the door, smiling. Over the past few months, what had started as gratitude had turned into something much deeper. "Ready to go? Alice is already in the car." Meanwhile, at the federal penitentiary, Vincent Sterling swept the floor of the prison library. His gray hair and orange uniform stood in stark contrast to the arrogant man who had once ruled an empire. "Hurry up, Sterling," shouted the guard. "You still have the cafeteria to clean." Vincent, who had once despised cleaning workers, now understood firsthand the value and dignity of every job. His cellmates, mostly black men who had been unjustly convicted, had taught him lessons that no business school could offer. In the visiting room, his former lawyer Richard brought only bad news. "Vincent, you lost your last appeal. Your 25-year sentence has been upheld. And there's more, your former company is suing you for moral damages. They want $2 billion in compensation." Back in the real world, Jonathan had become a national figure. He lectured at universities on how dignity and competence do not depend on position or skin color. His story inspired thousands of workers to report abuse and discrimination. What I learned, Jonathan said during a televised interview, is that Vincent Sterling was not defeated by revenge. He was defeated by his own arrogance. When you treat people as if they are invisible, you forget that they are watching, learning, and preparing themselves. Rachel, sitting in the audience with Sophie and Alice, smiled proudly. Jonathan had proven that true strength does not come from the position you hold, but from the values you carry. The last scene shows Vincent watching this interview on television in prison, finally realizing that he had underestimated not just one man, but an entire system of values that money could never corrupt. Vincent tried to humiliate a janitor and ended up being swept out of his own life. Jonathan proved that the best revenge is not to destroy your enemy, but to build a success they could never imagine achieving. If this story of justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories of people who turned humiliation into victory through intelligence and dignity.